So here's how this goes. I'll introduce you.
Okay.
I have questions, and they are like right up your alley kinds of questions, like all built from what you do. And so any questions before we begin?
Gosh. No, I don't think so.
Okay. I will note I have a hard stop at 4:45, which was not my plan, but that we should be just fine.
Okay, good. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So this afternoon's conversation is one I've been looking forward to for a long time. You can ask Jill how much I pestered her on Instagram. It's a real privilege to introduce someone who has not only shaped the experience of so many students, faculty, and leaders here at NDSU, but who has also quietly, consistently helped an entire community move toward greater well-being, courage, and connection. Dr. Jill Nelson is a professor and counselor education at NDSU, where she has spent more than 2 decades teaching, mentoring, and leading. She's served as Associate Dean, Interim Co-Dean, and continues to invest deeply in faculty development and leadership across campus. Her work sits at the intersection of research and real life, translating ideas about resilience, shame, courage, and well-being into something people can actually live out. Her impact doesn't stay inside the university, it moves outward into boardrooms, nonprofits, classrooms, and communities across the Fargo-Moorhead region and beyond. Through initiatives like the People Project, Health Through Happiness, she has helped turn conversations about mental health into measurable, meaningful change, reaching dozens of organizations and thousands of individuals in deeply practical ways. She's delivered more than 200 presentations, many of them invited keynotes, not because she's chasing a stage, but because people keep asking her to come back. Her work resonates, it's grounded in research, but it's also deeply human, rooted in story and connection, and in the belief that leadership begins with the courage to show up as who we are. I can say personally that that impact is real. I've had the opportunity to hear Jill speak and to learn from her in spaces like burnout prevention and living big, and emerging alumni a daring approach to leadership. And like so many others, I walked away not just informed, but encouraged, thinking differently about how I lead, how I show up, and what it actually means to live well in the midst of full and demanding lives. Jill has a way of making complex ideas feel accessible and hard conversations feel safe. People often describe her sessions as less of a lecture and more of a conversation, and I can attest to that. I think that says everything about how she educates and leads. She is quite simply the kind of leader who brings light into the room, steady, thoughtful, and deeply committed to helping others flourish. Welcome to Real Talk.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Bethany. That was a really lovely introduction. Thank you. I'm gonna probably save a recording of that, and when I'm having a bad day, just be like, who am I? That's who I am. Yeah.
It's so true. And I think it's, I don't know who listens to these things in recording, but I think, I've been in that room and I have felt like, someone is saying something real. And we've all been in those rooms where it's supposed to feel like that, but it doesn't. And so just thank you for being that person. So grateful for you and your work. When people read your bio, they see professor, leader, researcher, but when you think about your life and your work, how would you define it?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. So I think, I'm all of those things and, different roles. I'm friend, daughter, auntie. That's my favorite role, to like biological, children that my brothers have, but also to many children of my friends. I think I often think of myself as someone who, one of my core values is authenticity. And so that's a real strength of mine. It's also, not always a strength because I cannot do anything but keep it real. So I think through that, I think kind of one of my callings is really helping people also be real. There's so much pressure to perform, please, perfect that, and we think we can't really show up as ourselves, but that ends up leaving us very lonely. So I think I really like to use my life, my hard lessons often, and research and all of those things to really help people. So
I appreciate that because I think sometimes the titles are overwhelming. They feel like, oh, this is this person. And when you really bring it down to like, I'm here to help people, I think that's just really helpful. And I think I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, well, blah, 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 a provost. I don't even know what that is. Or a researcher. What do they even do? And so
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
about the titles and the things and the ways that people describe our work that can be like distancing. And
Hmm.
I'm 0% surprised that in the first part of this conversation, you're like, yeah, I help people. That's what I do.
Yeah, yeah. I think, my favorite role probably was Associate Dean for Professional Development and Leadership. I remember when that announcement first came out, we didn't have Associate Deans it was the College of Human Development and Education at that time. And I remember reading it and thinking like, I think everyone's going to apply for that. Like, this is the most amazing, like, this is like I'm like, everyone's going to want this job, and of course not everyone wanted that job. Several people did, but, it was like, wow, I get to, help people be successful in their careers, help faculty figure things out, new faculty, mid-career faculty, and just, that's their faculty, but it's just people, right?
Yeah.
And helping them be successful. And that was really exciting. Yeah.
Well, I think like even that thought process, that framework is so valuable in all titles and spaces. And I think it even like really combats the function of imposter syndrome. Like everyone holding these roles, no matter what the title is at the end of the day and the beginning of the day and throughout the day, just a person.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think especially when you are kind of hired into a leadership role or elevated into a leadership role, then I know like people have expectations of you that are different, which come with the role. Like, yes. Sometimes they're not great expectations. Like now you are all knowing, or now you are, above, everything. But oftentimes it's our own expectations. And actually, can I tell a story about when I became the Associate Dean?
Yes.
Okay. So it was, I'm just going to get a little drink of water first. Good. So it was, this is many years ago, but there were a couple of us who, were finalists for this position. And, and I just went like, okay, I'm going to just do this like I think it should be done. And so I can use my skills as a counselor, my knowledge of what helps people be well. And, and I said, I want to help faculty, but I really just want to help people. And so my ideas were really about, how can we make people happier at work? Yes, also we'll learn how to do, our portfolios and how to, the nitty-gritty stuff. But I'm like, really, everyone, faculty, staff, everyone, like how can we show up and feel better about showing up?
Yeah.
And, so that's really kind of was my plan. And our first back to school kind of meeting, there were session options where people could choose from meditation and so, more concrete things and, just a whole variety. But it was like kicking off the year is like, how can we kick off the year really well?
Yeah.
And be well as we do this. And and I got the position, I think, because that, people were really excited about that. And but about 6 months into the position, I kept thinking like, this is not going well. I'm so bad at this. It's like, I'm really like, everything I had these ideas and I'm like, that's probably too counselory. I don't want to be too counselor. I don't want to be seen as flaky, or I don't want to be, counselor. And I kept thinking that, and I would talk to mentors, people who are also in my college, and, and I'm like, this is just not going well. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's going well. And there's this exercise I take people through about their identities, and we often have these like pictures in our head of who we're supposed to be, or who people are supposed to be. And so when I thought, I'm like, okay, what is an associate dean? And so and of course these things are often, once we write them down, we're like, oh, that's a little ridiculous. But so I wrote down, I'm, it's a man, that's a man,
Uh-huh.
with a beard. And I was like, I'm in my 40s, and well, then I was in my 40s, figuring that out. Jacket with the patches on the elbows,
Mhm.
got a leather bag with it's perfectly worn, it's like, I'm like, I'm like, they're wise, they're very serious. And, and all of these things, none of which I am, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I'm like, okay. So that was my measuring stick.
Yeah.
So unconscious measuring stick, thinking about and I'm like, man, I am really not good at this. And so, once I was like, oh, okay, actually, that's not who they hired. They hired me, and that's not
Right.
who I am. And that, and so that could just actually be really helpful about what kind of unwanted identities are, that are we kind of carrying around with us. But it helped me kind of get some perspective
Yeah.
and kind of realign with who I am and what I decide to do that people were excited about. So yeah.
I think that's so important, and my whole hope and purpose in recording these conversations is if we can speed up everyone's learning curve in
Yeah.
this reality, it would be really beneficial. And I will say, thinking about my first or second promotion, and thinking in my head that I would just become someone different.
Yep.
Stepping
Yeah.
into this role, stepping into this office, stepping into this title, I would become the person I had pictured. And that never happens.
Yeah.
Ever.
Right. I
And
know.
and I think I appreciate your example because specifically the leather bag, I saw it and it was not brand new. It was
Yeah.
you know, this has gone to coffee shops and this has written dissertations and this has traveled around
Yes.
the world. And you know, I think if that's the image in your head of success, yeah, you're always failing.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Yeah.
picture isn't real and that's not who they hired.
No. No. Right. Yeah. So and I carried that with me, when I would go in, when the dean would ask me to go into meetings, and, and I was going to be probably the only woman around that table.
Mhm.
And, some of those meeting tables, the chairs, your feet don't hit the floor when you sit in them. And then it's
Uh-huh.
makes you feel more like a kid, and so,
Yes.
it'd be like, okay, that's not who's going into this meeting.
Yep.
You are. And be just, preparing myself for that imposter syndrome, or those messages of be a different person. Yeah.
I love that, and I love kind of the expanded perception of imposter syndrome. I am not somebody who has regularly been I don't know if I deserve to be here. And our in my time at the University of Utah, our vice president of EDI was phenomenally brilliant and said in a meeting pretty early on in my tenure there, sometimes it just looks like maybe no one who looks like you has been here before. And so this picture that you create is just what you're used to being in that space. And now you're in that space and your brain is having a hard time figuring that out. And this for me is the next step in that conversation of no, really, what did you picture? When
Yeah.
you thought about what this was going to be or who this person is, let's I want you to sketch it out and then
Yes.
realize that that's not who you are and that they picked you. And
Yeah.
I appreciate how tangible that is so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to know, you've spent your career helping people navigate well-being, courage, connection. What first called you into that work?
Oh gosh. It's actually was my own personal work, really. And it has its base in shame, which is a hard emotion. I managed to work into every conversation. I'm a real hit at dinner parties, let me tell you. But it's so important to talk about because it's a universal human emotion. And but shame also convinces us that we're the only person that feels that way. And it's that feeling when we are questioning our worth, assuming others are better than us or are more worthy than us. This idea that, in order to be loved or lovable, we have to be perfect or polished, or, we have I call them our conditions of worth, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, that, and every single person has that. If you have the ability to connect with other people, you have the potential to experience that emotion. And so we all at some point or another wonder if we're okay, or, you know,
Yeah.
and so I think just my own personal work, you know, counselors have to go to counseling, and just, you know, working through that and realizing how universal that is and how much you see it, and how, you know, that oftentimes people think they're like depressed, like they could have something diagnosable. And like sometimes it's shame. It's this
Yeah.
universal emotion, and like getting some perspective. So for me, it really came from my personal work, and then how my life and my world just changed when I started seeing my own worthiness, not because I'm winning or,
Yeah.
you know, succeeding or doing this, but I just, you know, I deserve to be here as much as everybody else, not more, not less, the same.
Yeah.
So, so understanding that, and like how much that held me back,
Yeah.
whether that's, you know, like not, like just, oh gosh, like even in school, I think about in college, right? Like, oftentimes shame shows up as actually perfectionism.
Okay.
Like this, if I do everything perfectly, if I do it the best, no one can question what I've done. No one can, you know, like critique it. No one can say anything bad about it. And we don't have any control about what people say. So, you know, that,
Yes.
and so it almost becomes addictive. And so, you know, like knowing the answer in a classroom, but not raising my hand
Mhm.
because I was so just paralyzed with fear of saying the wrong thing, because
Yeah.
that wrong thing would just be more proof that I'm not good enough.
Yep.
I'm not okay. And, you know, so it doesn't have to be trauma, or, you know, sometimes it is trauma, but like it's just, thinking about all the times I really wish I would have shown up and I
Yeah.
didn't,
Yeah.
because I was afraid to be anything less than perfect, correct, right, you know, all of those things. And I, you know, and regret is an emotion I don't want to sit in.
Yep.
I hate that emotion. So oftentimes that's, that, you know, it's not fear that holds us back. It's like the perfectionism and things, you know, because we, like, you know, we're all afraid at some point. So the courage piece is, you know, understanding that courage is a skill we can learn, and how we can, and giving permission for people to be brave and to try new things and to mess them up, and still be an okay person.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like that. I mean, I don't know, I can't think of anything better that I would than like what I want to do, really,
Yeah.
is, you know, thinking about the times I've really stayed small and held myself back, or sold, you know, like sold myself out
Yeah.
because of some of those just beliefs. And I see it in my students, I see it in my clients, I see it in meetings that, you know, like people just not showing up really as themselves. And so teaching the skills to be able to do that, it, that just was really exciting for me. And it started with shame, really, and
Yeah.
wanting to teach my students about it, because I mean, it's just rampant in counseling sessions. And yeah, so it kind of, steamrolled from there. Yeah, that's how, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I want to pause there and say, you know,
mhm.
I read some data recently that was like, in this current era online, your Gen Z and younger are so comfortable sharing information, getting on a camera, talking, teaching, but that depth of wisdom or lived experience isn't there, where older generations have a harder time hopping on this call saying, yes, it can be recorded and be shared.
Yeah.
And I want to pause and thank you for being willing to do this, because in all of my years of lived experience and education, I don't think I'd ever heard anyone say that shame convinces us that we are the only ones who feel this way. And like,
Mhm.
for me, that is like revolutionary in the sense that like, why is it so alienating? Like, oh, because I'm so sure that no one has ever experienced or felt what I am experiencing or feeling. And like, I do just want to thank you for being like, yeah, hi,
Mhm.
I have like, you have really valuable things to say. And how do we
Yeah.
share them? And how do we make progress together? So thank you for that.
Yes. Yeah.
And thank you for just helping me understand that a little bit better. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then you were talking about courage, and that leads me right into the next thing I want to talk about, which is you talk a lot about daring leadership. What does that look
Mhm.
like on like a Thursday? Because I
Oh,
think sometimes we think about like, I don't know, for me immediately, I picture like Teddy Roosevelt on a horse, like
yep.
daring leadership. But like, that's not always the circumstance we're in when we are running late to work and have not had our coffee or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Daring leadership. Yeah. Getting in the arena, and all of these, like one of, like, I think, what was it? 12 plus years ago, I did the shame work that I was doing led me to Brene Brown, and I got to train with her, and I'm trained in all of her work, and an early adopter, so that, because it really changed my life. So yeah, so daring leadership on a Thursday looks like, yeah, it sometimes the arena that we go into, we use that metaphor, it's a small one. So it might just be owning, yeah, say we're running late, and then just, just not trying to make excuses, or, just saying like, I'm sorry, like, thanks for waiting, and then, just keep going, and
Yeah.
not say like, but this happened and that happened, and, not getting in a
Mhm.
blame game, or even worse, just like hiding, and, and
Yeah.
just saying like, oh gosh, like, I'm not, this is a reflection of me as a leader, and I should never be late, and that can never happen. And then, canceling the meeting just so people would know you'd be like, I mean, like,
Uh-huh.
just like, yeah, like, just being, because you can't do the meeting perfectly, like, just not having it.
Mhm.
Um, it might look like, being in a meeting, and just saying like, I'm not sure we're on the right track. Can we slow this down and get a little more curious? Maybe interrupting groupthink. It
Mhm.
might, yeah. So, taking responsibility for something, saying, I'll take a stab at the first draft of that policy. Let's try it and see what goes. Yeah, it's just like, for each of us, it looks a little different depending on our job, but ultimately it's setting our armor aside, and showing up more authentically. So, um, armor can be, perfectionism is a huge one, a huge piece of armor, or, um, oh gosh, like gossip,
Yeah.
or judgment. I mean, we all judge, like, that's our brains do that automatically, but
Yep.
um, or blaming, or, like, behaviors we've all had, like, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you're like, ugh, I don't really like to be that person. That's not really who I am. That, can be, just instead of getting into a gossip or a real blaming, like, let's just talk about the leadership or something like that,
Yeah.
and why, we're just saying, okay, this is the situation, let's move forward. That might be daring leadership on a regular day. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, I'm quitting my job, and I'm trying a new thing, or I'm doing, it doesn't have to be grand sweeping gestures. It can
Yeah.
even just be, telling a student or an employee like that, something's not going well. You know,
Well,
that's
and
hard.
it is hard. And you said something. You said courage is a skill that you can learn. And what I'm picturing or feeling in those contexts is like, is it safe to speak up? Am I going to say the thing? Am I going
Yeah.
to own whatever this thing is? And so a question I would ask you is, what are the ways that we can become more courageous?
Oh gosh. The number one way to be more courageous is to get used to being uncomfortable. Um, and, Brene says it, when I say uncomfortable. Also, you could say that vulnerability, which is risk, emotional exposure, basically doing something you don't know how it's going to work out. Like putting yourself out there, that's vulnerability. And that, well, to use her research informed definition, sucks. and embrace the suck of that. Yes. And it sucks. It does not feel good. When you think about telling someone, they hurt your feelings, or you're disappointed in, like I feel it in my stomach, like, ooh, like, ugh, like I don't. And so what we start feeling that way, and our first instinct often is to shut it down, numb, grab our phone, grab some chips, grab some wine, just like pretend that didn't happen. And so we're like, we have to understand, like, when we feel that, like, be able to name, like, okay, that's just vulnerability. And that's the first sign, like maybe you're doing something important, or you're just uncomfortable. It's not necessarily, we often take it as a warning sign that something's very wrong, because it feels like, it can feel like, that part of our brain that's triggering us danger. It can feel like that. So yeah, the first thing is always embracing the suck of vulnerability. Just get ready to be uncomfortable. The people who can be in the discomfort the longest, the most, are the ones who make the biggest changes. And I have a tattoo, a little saying here. It says courage over comfort. And lots of times I want to draw a Sharpie on it and be like, nope,
comfort sounds great right now.
Yes. Yeah. Because I mean, there is a saying, like, you can be courageous or comfortable, but you can't be both. And so, yeah, I mean, the number one skill is really just being used to being uncomfortable, because it's going to not feel good.
It's not going to feel good, but it is going to end. Like that is, like that the discomfort does end. And so, I mean, I have a very vivid memory from like sophomore year of college, and there had been a party and it didn't go well. And I remember like walking up past the dining hall and thinking, like, okay, this is a news cycle. Like I don't have to wait this out forever. I don't have to be here forever. There will be something new. And so, like, I have something I can hold on to when I'm feeling that way. That reminds me tangibly, you've been here before. This will end. How do we help someone who maybe doesn't have that, like, deeply visceral, traumatizing moment that they endured and overcame? How do you help someone understand, or how do you explain, like, this will not be forever? What is, or is it something different in your experience?
Well, yeah, sometimes I just say that, like, this won't be forever. Or just doing, what's the worst thing that can happen, because, and then again, when you start actually writing down that story, I'm like, I'll die. Like, no, you won't die. Like, that's not, I mean, that's always my first to go to, I'll die. Like, it'll, and I'm like, we haven't, I've taken a ton of people through this courage work and have not lost one yet. Like, and also, I mean, there's some science behind it too. I think most emotions, like the experience of them, last at most like 90 seconds.
Interesting.
I think that, and I don't have the citation, but that, the only way through, well, to get over an emotion is to go through it. And so to sit with that, like, oh, if it's, what did I do? Or I can't believe I said that. I call it a vulnerability hangover. Like, like, what? Like, oh my God. Or, like, maybe, having that person in our life, or people that we can even say, like, I'm about to do something real brave. Can I call you what I've done? And then, and just know, because we have support. But yeah, like sometimes it's unpacking, like, well, what are you afraid of happening? What could go right? You know, what's the best possible scenario? You know, just kind of unpacking some of that. But yeah, just helping even sometimes sit through it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, instead of like, don't grab that phone, just stick with it. Don't suck in those tears. Like, just stay with it. And, you know, it does pass.
Does it get easier with repetition?
It does. Yeah, it always feels yucky. Like that feeling, it's evolutionary, actually. You know, it's like our brain's like, you're not safe,
Right.
because we're trying something new. So we build confidence, or, knowing like, okay, this doesn't feel good. This really like is scary. It's uncomfortable, but like, I know I have 100% track record of surviving and, and managing it and doing it. So it becomes easier to, like, when, on the other side of this discomfort are greater things.
Yeah.
It's not a guarantee, sometimes it's something, that did not work out, but, we don't want to get to the end of our career, of our life or whatever, and say, God, I wish I would have done that. But I was too afraid.
Yeah.
So, it gets a little easier. It never gets easy, but
right.
Yeah.
Helpful. Thank you for all of the things.
Yeah.
When you walk into a room, whether it's a classroom or a boardroom or a training or any interaction, what are you noticing or paying attention to first?
I'm looking always at the people, and how are they, right? Like, are they, how do they seem as individuals? Are they tired, discouraged, excited, interested, checked out? And then how are they working together? Are they connecting to each other? Are they talking? Are they siloed? Just like, what's the vibe, I guess? How are they doing? And depending on, the situation, addressing that to a certain level. First thing in my class, I'm always like, how are you? Like, how's it going? What's going on? What's new? Connecting on a personal level. Because I'm interested because I'm curious, but also, that will affect how are they showing up that day?
Yeah.
It's hard to pull up people who are exhausted, for 3 hours of class, when you probably yourself are, tired too, if it's the end of the semester or, whatever that is. But kind of trying to read the room and look for, trying to help people meet them where they are.
I appreciate that you talked about what you do and then you talked about reading the room, because I think sometimes reading the room seems really like intangible. Like you just assess the vibe and
Yeah.
And
yes.
I think the way that you walked through that is so logical and makes so much sense. And I think one of the things that I've heard a lot about from people is like, I really hate networking, or I don't feel good at that small talk piece, or like, how do you make connections with people? And so thinking about your work in the connection space, what is a piece of advice you would give someone if they really struggle with like, I don't know how to just walk into this room?
Yeah. Oh, that is hard. And just as a country, generation, we're struggling with that. And, I think, for some people, the answer might be, think of some questions, go-to questions you can, that are open-ended. They're not just, how are you? How about this weather? But, thinking about like, what are you excited about? Or, not what do you do? Like the typical things, which we default to, just out of habit sometimes, or discomfort.
Yeah.
So maybe it's, preparing some questions. Maybe actually something that I tell people, if you don't know what to say, like give a genuine, it has to be genuine, compliment.
Yeah.
Like, what do you notice about other people? Like, wow, like, that, I really resonated with that story. Or, even at the grocery store, like, I love that sweater. That is
Mhm.
so, like, such a great color. And, just, if you notice something, say something, about, we have our heads in our phones, heads down. We've kind of lost the ability to talk to people. One of the best ways actually to increase connection, your feelings of connection, is to start talking to strangers. And it can just be those like grocery store conversations, started with, maybe that is about the weather, or,
Yeah.
like, whoo, like I blew in here from the parking lot, and, just something, and not only do we start feeling connected, that actually it helps our brains, reminds our brains like the world's not like a totally scary place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's parts of our brains that are always on the lookout. And so we have to remind them in our world today, where we're not going to be trumped by, woolly mammoths and those kinds of things. Like, mostly we're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the subtext of this entire conversation is like tangible. Like this is something you can do today. And I
Mhm.
think like I'm trying to think about, because you brought up the grocery store, and I'm trying to think about like where that switched for me. And like we spent 4 years in Florida, where the grocery store of choice is Publix, where shopping is a pleasure. And it is. And like I will say their staff is trained to start conversations with you.
Uh-huh.
And it was our first, we've moved a lot since then, but it was our first move. And you're like, haven't talked to anybody outside of maybe where you work. And you don't know anybody or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, I am looking forward to going to the grocery store. Why am I looking forward to going to the grocery store? Like, oh, because there are connections there. It is a place for connection. And I think that really changed my perception of like, you actually can just start conversations with people at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And if you're not like have like nefarious intent, people are open to it. Right. Yeah. You're not trying to sell them something. You're just,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And you can walk away.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's it is, you also can't stand in someone's checkout line like forever. And so I think that is the other thing, is like, it's a safe space to try, because you're not in a car with someone for the next 4 hours. You're not in a space where you can't leave, or it's not normal to depart. And I think that's the other thing about like practicing, is like pick where you practice.
Yes.
And like, that makes the grocery store a really ideal place to do that.
Yeah. Right. Doing a kind thing or anything is just can be simple. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate all of that. I'm going to ask you one closing question, which means I have to pick the last one. All right, hold on.
Okay.
Okay, this is a great one, because we're talking a lot about pushing our comfort zone and being brave and courageous and all of these things. So how do we hold both the ambition of meaningful and courageous and daring leadership and work with the need to take care of ourselves? Because I think like I'd want to talk about that, I think, before we close.
Yes, excellent question. And I'm all about paradoxes right now. Yeah, the both and holding both. Actually, the one thing I caught, when I'm teaching people how to be brave, like caution them, like just because you know how to be brave doesn't mean you have to be brave all the time. Like you cannot go into every arena every day, you'll wear yourself out. And the one thing that really helps us know, is this an arena thing or not an arena thing, is our values. Having a very clear sense of what is important to you will help you answer that question and help you get clear on, I got to get uncomfortable. I got to be brave. Or like, man, like this one, I got to choose my, family time or my, personal time, or I just, I don't have the capacity to get in there about this right now. And if you're not questioning that decision later, you probably, hey, like that was a values informed choice. And so, yeah, we cannot be everything to everyone and go in all the time and save everything without burning ourselves out and then having nothing for anybody. So our values help us make hard decisions.
Well, and I think what you're painting is this picture of sustainability. Like if your job is to be courageous and daring in this space, how are you going to decide how to protect your ability to be there or even to be in any other space for any amount of time? And I think I think the common illustration I would use in this is you have to put your oxygen mask on before you help somebody else.
Yes.
But what we're talking about is this version of if you're going to do the things that you value, whatever your values are, there has to be a way to make that decision that every fight isn't your fight. Every moment isn't your moment.
Yeah. Yes. And that it's not easy, but it's important. I think, I had to one time for my own well-being, had to step down from a well-being committee. And, it was like,
Amazing.
This feels so wrong, but I knew after I finally just made the decision and said it, it was like relief, and I'm like, will people be questioning that? Absolutely. Will they think I should be able to do that? And, yes, but I'm just telling you, I cannot, it was a hard decision, because I was thinking about what will people think? What will people think? And I'm, I was like, they're going to think whatever they're going to think. And but I'm fried and I don't have the capacity for that. Yeah.
Because no matter how brave and daring you are, you're still a human.
Yes. Which I, have to remind myself of sometimes. I'm really good at reminding others, but
Super weird that we're not actually superheroes. So there's that.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for the time. This was, time flew. This was so helpful for me. It will be so helpful for so many others. I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
It was so fun. Good. I hope it's helpful for someone out there.
Well, it was helpful for me,
invitation.
And I am confident it will be helpful for others. And absolutely, thank you. And I hope you have a great remainder of your Daring and Courageous Thursday.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Jill.
All right. Bye-bye.